If you own a small business and you might be looking to sell, you could run into some major issues. Forbes estimates that 9 out of 10 businesses listed never actually sell. Why? Because there's only one way to sell. You need to do these 4 steps first. So if you want to be a part of the 10% of businesses that sell for profits, we've created a free checklist for you so you can sell without those hurdles that normally hold you back. Download the free checklist by visiting www.abundantculture.co/checklist.
Welcome back to the Abundant Culture Podcast, where business owners like you come to learn how to grow the valuation of their companies so they can sell in the future. On this show, you'll learn how to sell for top dollar and invest in profitable businesses around the country. Now, here are your hosts, Jazz and Joe.
Hey, today we want to talk all about the importance of business systems, because we know that it is so important, and not a lot of people know the significance of having like business systems in place. Even for the people that are just like solopreneurs, like you still need a system, and we'll go deeper into like what we mean by systems, like examples and stuff like that later throughout the show.
Yeah, so the reason we wanted to talk about this today is because, as you all know, we just got done rebranding our podcast to specifically focus on helping people either sell their companies or invest in other small businesses. And I think systems is one of the most important aspects of either one of those things, whether you want to be a investor or whether you want to just sell your company. If you're one of those people who, have a company that you may want to sell, it's really, really important that you have your systems in place. And I think really, I like to take kind of a top-down approach when it comes to building out those systems. And really, it's just as simple is documenting everything that happens inside of your business and using that document that you're creating to eventually create your SOP, which is your standard operating procedures. So even if you're a solopreneur, it's good to have that standard operating procedure, because as you start to hire people, if you do desire to hire people one day, you're going to need to train those people, because you need to understand that I don't care what type of degree they have or how smart they are or how what their work ethic is. At the end of the day, they're not going to understand the nuances of your business unless you explain it to them. There's people who I've had work for me and they are brilliant employees. But if I didn't tell them or show them how I needed the job done or how, they needed to do certain things in the workplace, they weren't going to be very valuable to me. So I think as a small business owner, it's really up to you to create those systems. And it just starts by, how do you serve your customers? So how do you take an order? How do you greet people? If there's a complaint, how do you handle that complaint? What avenues do you handle complaints on? Do you get Google reviews and Yelp? If so, how do you log into Yelp? How do you log into your Google reviews in order to reply? It's such a detailed thing. And I think that's why SOPs are like these huge documents that are dozens of pages long.
They can be very long.
Yeah.
Very, very long.
Yeah. Like, how long is ours?
I'm looking it up right now. I think ours was maybe about 20 pages.
Yeah, so ours is 20
which
pages.
is like honestly on the short side.
Yeah.
Because after I got done with our SOP, we have one for our podcast, and we have one for the coffee shops, and we're talking about the coffee shop one that's like 20 pages long. After I got done and we had the employee meeting, and as I'm reading them the edits and everything that they need to know, I'm like, dang, I should have put this in there too. I forgot about that. So it probably could have been at least 5 pages longer.
Yeah, you can probably see some SOPs that are probably 100 or more pages long. So ours is pretty short, and that's because we're still somewhat new to business. We haven't, experienced everything that there is to experience in business. So ours are a little bit on the short side, but we update ours probably at least on a quarterly basis because we're always coming up with new things, new systems that we didn't necessarily spell out in the older SOP. So you want to jot down everything that you do in your business, put it together in a document, and understand that this is a living, breathing document in a way. And I say that to say that at the end of the day, it's never going to be truly finished and it's never going to be truly perfect. So you got to make sure that you revisit it from time to time to make sure that you tweak things and update things as they need to be updated, because your business is also a living, breathing thing. So it's going to change. And as your business change, the SOPs and the systems that go along with it need to also change as well. So and it's truly important because at the end of the day, like I said, this podcast is all about selling your business, increasing the value of your business, investing in businesses and things of that nature. If you don't have systems in place to where you can take a week off from your business and still bring sales into the door, you don't necessarily have a business. You're an entrepreneur. That doesn't stop you from being an entrepreneur or a solopreneur or whatever the case may be. But it's like a glorified job, because the way I define businesses are things, they're entities that exist outside of the person who owns the entity, if that makes sense. Like if the Bill Gates died today, the owner of Microsoft, if he died today, Microsoft would still be a huge multi-billion-dollar company. Microsoft doesn't need Bill Gates in order to continue to operate and exist. Now, you can argue that him being around is a lot better than him not being around, because we can see a lot of times when...
I mean, we saw that with Apple.
Yeah, with Apple's honestly, I think Apple's still a great company, but Apple hasn't been the same since Steve Jobs has been gone. I'm sorry. And it's funny because I didn't start actually using Apple products until
like this year.
Yeah, until very recently. But even when I look at the innovation that happens at Apple today and I compare it to what was happening back then, I'm like, oh, it's definitely not the same company. So not to say that you're not going to have an impact on your company, because you definitely are. But what I'm saying is that just like, Apple with Steve Jobs, your company needs to be able to survive without you for a decent amount of time. And, all the businesses that I'm running, I want them, probably with the exception of the podcast, because the podcast is kind of us, we might be able to systematize that to where we don't need to be on here either. But I don't think that's, in the plans anytime soon.
Optimize podcast sell. And we actually have a good friend who sold his podcast, so maybe we can get him on.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll be a good episode as well. But really just make sure that you have systems in place in your business so that if you're going for a couple weeks or a couple months, or if you die, I hate to be kind of doom and gloom about it, but at the end of the day, that is a reality someday in the future. And for me personally, I like to think that when I no longer want to run these certain types of companies, whether I want to sell them or whether, I just pass away one day and I still own them or whatever the case may be, I want to know that everything's in place that they need in order to continue to serve the customer. Because the way I think about it is, your business serves so many people. It has customers, you probably have vendors, you may even have employees, and at least a handful of people lives will be impacted if your business was no longer around. And I feel like it's a disservice to them if, as entrepreneurs and business owners, we don't have the systems in place that need to be in place so that all those people can continue to get served, even if we're not around. So having systems in place, I know it kind of sounds like a lot of work, and sometimes it kind of is, but it's something that's necessary.
It's a lot of work up front.
Yeah.
Because once you have the system in place, it runs like, I'm sure you've heard this before, the well-oiled machine, but that is literally it. Once you build the factory and you put the equipment in, then it's gonna run.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it's a disservice to your customers, to your vendors, to your partners, to anybody that your business works with, if you don't have those systems in place and something happens to you or you just have to go out of town for whatever case and everything stops because you're not around. So that's the importance of systems. And also, if you don't have those systems in place, it is borderline impossible to really sell your business, because most businesses sell for kind of a valuation of two things. You value the assets, which even if you're a solopreneur, you might have assets, but people also value the cash flow. And the thing about it is, if you're the only person that's doing things in your business, then the cash flow is dependent upon you being there. That means that the cash flow probably stops when you're no longer there. So it becomes really, really hard to sell your company if you're a solopreneur. I'm not going to say that it's impossible, but it's definitely a lot harder. The businesses that I look at buying, a lot of times, I know that if anything happens to the seller, if I take it over, or if, whatever reason the seller's not there, that business is going to run regardless of, what's going on in the background. And I think that creates not only peace of mind for the people that work within your business, but I also think it creates some financial security as well, because everybody has their own reasons of, being in business, but I believe that everybody can kind of attest to that at least one of the reasons they're in business is to make money, because as my mentor says, if there's no margin, there's no mission. So
at least with for-profits anyway, and we're talking about for-profits specifically on this show.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I wanted to get into before we hop off is kind of tell us about your experience implementing systems and SOPs into our business, because I'm the one who probably gave some ideas, but I didn't actually write out the SOP because I have a system for that. So tell us about that process and a system of writing the SOP and some of the things that you might have included in there.
If you don't diversify your investment portfolio, you could end up losing it all. But most business owners don't know how to diversify to mitigate those risks. That's why we created this resource for you. This passive investing guide is a must-have if you're planning to invest in businesses. Don't hesitate. If you have more than 25 grand liquid, then you can't afford not to take advantage of this resource. Download the 4 reasons why in 2021 you need small businesses in your portfolio now by going to www.abundantculture.co/guide.
Yeah, so it actually took me a really long time. We were like on a call the other day, and Joe was like, yeah, I think it only took Jasmine like 4 days to do it. And it's like, no, it didn't. It took me months. And I kept having like iteration after iteration because I kept forgetting things. But then I finally had to sit down for our coffee shop specifically and say, okay, I'm going to get this done because our employees need this. And the meeting is scheduled for this day. So I have to make sure it's finished by that day. So I set a deadline for myself just to get it done because it can be very overwhelming. One of the things that helped me was looking at examples. So I had Ashley send me some examples because she worked at a company and she was like the HR person. So she had a lot of experience with HR. So I asked her like, yeah, is there anything I need to know in the HR department? Because we don't have an HR department yet. I'm the HR department at the coffee shops for now, because we aren't big enough. And she sent me like a couple of things. One of the things being an SOP. And I forgot like where else. I think I might have found like an SOP example on like the SBA website or something. Mm-hmm. Basically, you could just Google it. So I always like to start off with templates for everything that I do because it makes my job so much easier. Like whenever I come up with graphics, 9 times out of 10, I started with a template and then I just kept tweaking it until I liked what I saw. And then I had to figure out what exactly I needed to put in the SOP. So I was kind of thinking about like, okay, what, for example, let's say we hire someone, a barista at the coffee shop. They come into work on the first day. What do they do? So our SOP acts kind of like as a training manual too. I didn't put our recipes in here because that would have been a couple more pages. So I just put basically like where they can find the recipes, but you're more than likely to put that in there as well if you have like a food or restaurant business, or however it relates to you. But some of the things that came up when I was writing the SOP was, for example, we believed that it was a drug problem at the coffee shop. A couple of months before I actually even started writing the SOP again. So I said, okay, I definitely have to add that in, because I want to make sure that there is nothing anyone can say to me if I suspect they're doing drugs on shift. I mean, it's self-explanatory, I thought, but a lot of people don't have common sense like you do. So we really shouldn't even call it common sense. It should be just called sense, because it's really not common. So you really have to think about, what exactly do they need to do to get here? And then also the SOP for the podcast, it was, I think, only 2 pages long. It was really, really simple, but our team member that works on the podcast, she actually told me that I was one of the best projects that she's worked with, because of how organized I was. I was super duper proud of that, by the way. But in the podcast SOP, I said specifically, here's what I need. Here's when the podcast goes out. This is how you get to this. This is how you log in. This is how I want you to label the podcast when you're done editing it and upload it to this drive. So it's basically step by step of literally any and everything you can think of in your business. And if you guys have more questions, feel free to reach out and we can answer some more questions, and we can have another episode specifically about what goes into an SOP, and maybe we can even get somebody on to talk about it. I don't know if there's professional SOP writers. I do know someone that has an SOP course though, so we might be able to get him on to talk about that.
Oh, I didn't know we knew somebody like that.
So yeah, if you guys have specific questions, feel free to reach out. I will answer them, because I can honestly go on and on about what I put in the SOPs. I mean, money handling, uniforms, employee discounts, the list just goes on and on. Did you have any more questions about the SOP process?
No, I don't think I have any more questions. Just remember, what helps me when I'm putting together different processes that might go into the SOP. I just think in terms of steps and bullet points. So I whip out my phone, I go to my notes, and I just write down the steps or the bullet points that's included in something. And then that's kind of the foundation of what I like to go off of when I'm thinking about something that's process oriented. And that's
a really good point to make sure that you guys remember is make sure you get your employees to sign the SOP, because they need to read it and understand it. And we even had it as a non-disclosure in our SOP as well. So making sure that each team member actually reads it and understand it is the most important thing, because if they don't, then there's no point of the SOP.
Absolutely. Good point.
So that is all I have. Do you have any more?
Nope. That's all I have.
Awesome. So we'll see you next Friday. Can't remember the topic off the top of my head, but we'll see you next Friday.
Thank you for listening to the Abundant Culture Podcast with Jazz and Joe. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe, then leave an honest rating and review. And remember, we're ready to buy your business. So if you're ready to sell or passively invest in other small businesses, go to abundantculture.co for more information. We publish episodes every Friday, so we'll see you next week.